Hi, welcome to Senior Moment, Successful Aging. I'm Mary Beals-Luedtka, your host. I'm the director for the Area Agency on Aging at NACOG. You can reach us toll-free at 877-521-3500. This show is co-sponsored by the Area Agency on Aging and the Division of Lifelong Learning at Yavapai College. Our co-producers are Connie Del Castillo, and you can reach Connie at 928-717-7755, and also Allie Bateman. Allie Bateman is at the Area Agency on Aging. You can get her at that toll-free number, 877-521-3500. I want to welcome our guest today, John Farmer. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. So you're a financial advisor.
That's correct.
Right, and really what we're going to cover today a lot is really on scams, financial scams, which are rampant. But I want to step back a minute and get a little bit about who you are, where you come from.
Well, I was originally born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. I came out here to attend Prescott College in 1988. Graduated from Prescott College in 1992, went on to become a teacher where I taught for about 15 years before I was recruited into the financial services industry. And quickly after getting in, I saw a lot of unethical behavior, if not downright scams and fraud, and I quickly put two and two together and decided that I could take my teaching background and could apply that to the financial services industry to inform people how to make good decisions in regards to their finances. So I currently work with the Taylor & Padgett Financial Group, where we've been in Prescott since 1969. We're one of the largest and oldest independent financial channels in northern Arizona.
So, back to the abuse, why is there such a dramatic rise? We get a lot of calls at the Area Agency on Aging on that.
Well, there's three primary reasons we have such a dramatic rise. And the first one is strictly demographics. I mean, right now in the United States, we have 77 million people that are considered baby boomers. Those would be people born between 1946 and 1964. Every day in the United States, 10,000 of these people are retiring. This will be one of the largest demographic shifts that's ever happened in our nation, where so many people will be leaving the workforce. So just the sheer volume and number of people entering into the retirement age is the primary reason. And also bear in mind, 70% of the nation's investable wealth resides in the baby boomers. Mm-hmm. So that's the primary reason. The second reason is this explosion in information technology. Mm-hmm. The advent of the internet, online banking, online access, usernames, passwords, social media, email, all that has just created so many vulnerable spots for this particular generation to be taken advantage of. So the first reason would just be the sheer volume and the numbers. The second reason would be the explosion of information technology. And the third reason, I think, is really one of the most interesting, and it's because this generation, this 77 million people, this group of people entering into the retirement age, they all told the truth when they were growing up. They believed people. Business deals were done on a handshake, and you didn't have any reason to doubt anyone. You didn't have any reason to not trust someone. If someone in your community ripped someone off or did a crime or behaved in a way that was unethical, well, they got ran out of town in no time. And that's just the way things were. So this particular generation is unique in that they're honest and that they believe people. So the sheer volume and number of people going into retirement age, the explosion of information technology, and honesty has really created the perfect storm of why we've had such a dramatic growth in financial abuse amongst the elderly.
So I always refer myself as kind of Pollyanna, and I guess I am in that generation.
Right.
Now I don't feel so, I'm not alone, I guess, that it was the way we were raised. Well, what do these scams have in common? What is the common thread that you see?
The main common thread in almost every instance of scams and financial frauds, there's going to be two, but the first one is going to be how they ask you to do the transaction. And it's always going to be untraceable. if they are unethical, or if the activity is illegal or criminal, or they're ripping you off in some way, they're always going to request an untraceable transaction. So that can be in the form of a MoneyGram, that can be in the form of a cashier's check, but the first red flag for any senior would be, how are they requesting I get the money to them?
Okay.
If it's an untraceable transaction, then obviously they have something to hide, and there's a reason that they want to hide it. So that is blanket across the board. Almost all of financial scams are going to request an untraceable transaction. The second one is almost always going to be a sense of urgency or pressure. They're going to want you to do it quickly. They're going to pressure you to do it. They might call you back, so on and so forth. Any ethical business person and successful business person is not going to have a sense of urgency. They're going to have more of a laissez-faire attitude of like, well, whatever, when you get around to it, let me know. But someone participating in a scam or conducting a scam, they're going to want you to do it now, they're going to want you to do it tomorrow, and they're going to want it to do it by these very specific terms. So those are the two primary things that almost all scams and all instances of abuse have in common: an untraceable transaction and a sense of urgency.
I also think you just throwing this out there. Also, they've been contacted by them versus they've contacted. So the client has been contacted by someone.
Yes.
And oftentimes it's, should be the other way around. Usually you're seeking out, I'm going to go see you, I'm going to ask you questions about, for my finance and my financial advisor, not the other way around.
Absolutely. The most common scam out there right now amongst the elderly is, of course, this IRS scam. People calling saying that they owe money to the IRS, and if they don't pay it by a certain amount, of course, the payment types they request is through the form of a gift card, a rechargeable Visa, MasterCard, Western Union, MoneyGram, a cashier's check. And if you don't send the money right away, they're going to send a sheriff's deputy to your house to arrest you. And all consumers should know, first and foremost, that the IRS will never, ever contact you by phone, ever. They're always going to contact you with written correspondence. They're going to make a lot of attempts via written correspondence before they would ever even consider calling you on the phone. And almost always, whether it be any other, not the IRS, but it could be a garage door salesman or so on and so forth, rarely will people contact you unless they have ill intentions in mind.
Yeah. Because usually, again, when you're seeking out a service, it should be you calling them.
It should
and
be.
Checking them out before. So we do get a lot of folks, I got a call from so-and-so, and right away the red flag goes up.
Yeah.
So what are some other common schemes that are out there? You talked about the IRS one, and I have heard of that one. What are some other common schemes that you're seeing right now?
The common theme amongst all these schemes is, and what I tell everyone is, if anything sounds too good to be true, it is.
It is.
It's too good to be true. So, of course, you have the Nigerian prince scheme. That's a really common one. It's quite common, and I've seen this one lately, that elderly people who are divorced or widowed through their loneliness will access social media, and they'll befriend people on social media that are essentially imposters. And these imposters will create stories like they're traveling in Dubai, they're working on a multi-million-dollar oil and gas deal, but they misplaced their wallet, and they need a short-term $10,000 just to get down the road so they can receive this multi-million-dollar payout where they'll pay them back. So I see that one happening quite a bit, is preying on vulnerable and lonely seniors through social media and claiming to be someone you're not. And that one is especially hard for me to watch because the disappointment is twofold. First, you have the realization that this person that you were beginning to have emotions and affection for isn't real, and they lied to you. So you're lonely, you're vulnerable, and then you have this dramatic letdown. And then lo and behold, you come to find out that they actually ripped you off, that they actually stole from you. So to add insult to injury, that one is one that I'm seeing right now. Of course, I mentioned the Nigerian print scheme. There's all different variables of the Nigerian print scheme. I see that quite a bit. Phishing scams via email is really, really common. What a lot of people don't realize is that these emails, especially if they have an attachment to it, can be sent to your address. You simply open the attachment. You have no idea, but they infiltrate your computer immediately, where they can do any number of things. Take your computer hostage is quite common. They'll lock you out of your screen, and they'll tell you that you have to pay via PayPal or via Bitcoin. Again, always an untraceable transaction. That you have to pay them a certain amount of money in order to recover your information. And typically you pay the money, and they may or may not give you your information back. More often than not, I hear about them not doing it. And then I think what a lot of people don't realize is that we, as far as where I've really seen an increase, we have this perception that it's going to be an outside third party that's most likely going to take advantage of us. Statistically speaking, it's going to be someone we know. It's going to be a friend, a family member, or someone we've had a long time relationship with. And that's what makes it really difficult for this particular generation to be aware of and have their spider senses about, is because it's someone they already trust is in fact the person that that's taking advantage
Yeah, I
of
believe
them.
it's 85% of elder abuse, which includes financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, are family members and people they know.
It could be a child,
Yeah.
it could be a brother, it could be a sister,
Grandchild.
it could be a grandchild, it could be a caregiver.
Yeah.
That's even hired, a hired caregiver.
Exactly.
It could be anyone, but again, that's what makes it really, really hard. And again, these people are often older, they're vulnerable, and I've had instance after instance where I've informed people that I'm concerned that they're being taken advantage of by their caregiver, and they'll look me right in the eye and say, "No what?" And say, "No way."
I know.
And almost even say, "So what?" Like, I don't care
Yeah.
that I'm being taken advantage of. I trust them, which I find really, really interesting, which just speaks to the vulnerable position that they're in.
Well, I think it speaks to the loneliness issue.
Right.
Being socially isolated has now been equated to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day for your health. And it's worse for you than obesity.
Yeah.
Social isolation. So if you're isolated already, and then someone befriends you, you don't want to have them go away because then you're going to be alone again.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because one of the statistics I was researching shows that people who are taken advantage of through financial fraud or financial abuse are more likely to suffer from depression, and they're at higher instances of suicide because they're so humiliated that this happened to them. The other interesting thing about this particular generation is they don't like to talk about money. And so even if they do get taken advantage of, they're very, very unlikely to share it. They're unlikely to share it with a friend. They're very unlikely to report it to police or to NACOG or any other organization like that.
Yeah, I know. I was taught that way. We did not talk about money outside the family circle. Period.
Yeah.
That was drilled into our brains.
Yeah.
So that makes it really hard. And also, I think the embarrassment.
Right.
Can you really profile the victim?
Well, you can't totally profile the victim, but there are some common themes that I've certainly noticed. Loneliness would be a big one. People who are single, people who are physically or mentally vulnerable in some way. They're dependent on other people for assistance. People who, again, are honest believers are especially vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you apply to the sweepstakes mailings, there's a really good chance you could be a victim of financial fraud if you believe in those odds and those chances. But I've seen people, I know friends of mine that are in their 40s and 50s that are as sharp as a tack that have also been taken advantage of financial fraud. And I study this material all the time, and I've actually been a victim of financial fraud. I hired a moving company once, just went online, found this moving company, sent them a check, and never heard from them again. Tried to track them down, tried to email them, tried to phone call, never heard from them again.
Well, that's kind of a shout out for local business owners, right? You need to
Yeah.
go local so you can go back to them if something goes wrong. But I'm glad you said that, because I think it really can happen to anybody.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter your socioeconomic state, your gender, your race. It happens to everybody. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not really a stereotype.
And the level of sophistication in how these scams are conducted has gone up dramatically. There's people that do nothing but research, study, practice, and prepare for conducting these crimes.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, how do we profile the perpetrator?
It's like I said. Well, we mentioned earlier that
Yeah.
almost always the perpetrator is going to be someone you know, and in that situation, it's like you said, it's typically going to be a family member or something like that. And they may not start out with ill intentions. What I find more often than not is that at some point in the process they get to be greedy, and then they decide to take advantage of their elderly parent or so on and so forth. But the people who really practice this stuff, how do we profile them? It's difficult. I would say they're not employed, they don't have anything else to do. There's a good chance that they might have a history with drugs. There's a good chance that they might have a history in prison and in the prison system. I've never been to prison, so I don't know. I guess that's a good thing. But I hear in prison that they research, practice, and they talk quite a bit on how to take advantage of people, because it's something they can do from inside the bars.
They can do it from inside?
Yeah. Yeah, they can use their tentacles and their fingers, and they can not only do it, but they can profit from it while inside prison.
That is news to me.
Really?
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably true. I just didn't realize that before. I guess, again, back to Pollyanna.
Yeah.
I know that one of the cases we worked on, the grandchild had moved in with her grandmother and really was caring for her. And then she got involved with meth, and she just would borrow a little bit of money from her, and it got worse and worse and worse until, she was isolating her. She took all her money, and like you said, it didn't start out that way. But
Right.
the combination of the easy access and then the escalating drug use just was out of control, and that was in the Prescott area.
Yeah, I see that happen quite a bit.
Yeah.
I see that happen quite a bit. A real common scenario is the widow who maybe has 3 or 4 children, and one of the children is participating or acting as a caretaker. As time goes on, that child, for a number of different reasons, gets crossways or sideways with the other children, and then makes a series of financial decisions that really don't benefit the parent, but
Yeah.
actually benefit the child. The other thing we're seeing is a real interesting statistic. Over the past 3 decades, Americans have, the life expectancy of Americans has been getting longer and longer and longer every single year. Until now.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, but the reason until now is because of opiate overdose deaths in the United States. Our life expectancy actually shrunk. But the reason I bring that up is because one of the trends we're seeing with this elderly population, with those 77 million Americans moving into the retirement system, is they're living longer than ever. And as they live longer than ever, because of healthcare technology, oftentimes their bodies, and especially their hearts, are outlasting their brains. So if you were to chart Alzheimer's, dementia, or you were just to call it, mental decline, it would be a true hockey stick as far as the number of instances we've seen. And these people are especially vulnerable. And early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, or mental decline can be a very difficult thing to detect. But it also makes them a prime victim for someone looking to take advantage of someone. Because dementia, or people with early onset may not have the awareness of where their finances actually sit. They may not have the awareness of how much money they actually had, so on and so forth.
And they have a good, my mother has now severe Alzheimer's, but I look back to the early days, and she was a very intelligent woman, and she could hide it. She hid it for a long time, so we as children could not protect her. it took a while before it manifested itself to the point where action could be taken.
Yeah.
And this state, people don't realize Adult Protective Services doesn't have the same role as CPS, Child Protective Services. You can't go in, daughter can't call and say, I don't think mom's making good decisions. You need to go in there and intervene. But if they go in and the person is sane and talking okay and says, I don't need your help, they walk away.
Right. Absolutely. And as you know from your mom, especially when it starts, they can have good days and they can have bad days.
Correct.
They can have one day where they're not making any sense at all and they can't do simple math. And the next day they're totally fine.
And that's scary.
It's
scary for this stuff.
It's really scary for this stuff because one day they can be taken advantage of, and then you, as a family member that's concerned or as a friend that's concerned, you can investigate it. You can look into invoking power of attorney. You can look into getting a guardianship or something like that. But they may be having a really good day when you go to actually take those steps to activate your power of attorney or stuff like that. At that time, if they don't, if they don't like you or they're mad at you, they can remove you from power of attorney. They can block you from getting a guardianship. So you can actually end up doing more harm than good, even though you have the best of intentions to mind to protect this individual. It can really come back to bite you.
And there's a dramatic rise, like you mentioned earlier on Alzheimer's and dementia, again, because we're all living longer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Arizona is the second largest retirement state in the United States, behind Florida, of course. And as you would expect, we're the second largest incidences of financial fraud and abuse amongst the elderly in the nation as well. And unfortunately, as we talked about before the show started, there's not a lot of support for stricter enforcement in the state of Arizona, which I find interesting because we have such a large retirement population. They seem very interested in protecting themselves, but for whatever reason, we don't have a lot of intergovernmental services to really protect senior citizens.
We do not,
in
and even in the Older Americans Act, there is a Title VII for elder abuse, and we get for 4 counties $3,000.
Really?
So,
yeah.
and as well as I do, that's nothing.
Yeah.
We do the best we can with it. We use it to supplement our ombudsman program, or advocates for seniors that live in nursing homes. But what about everybody else? And how do we come together as a state? I think we need to be more aware of that.
Right.
We do need some better support systems. And it's a good thing we have folks like you, and I've got other friends in the community that are in the insurance business that are always on the lookout for those unethical practices. And that's how we hopefully keep an eye out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned unethical. There's a lot of financial abuse amongst the elderly that takes place that is outright criminal.
Right.
But there's even more that takes place that just walks the line between criminal and highly unethical.
Right.
And that latter that I mentioned is the part that really makes my blood boil.
Yeah.
When I look at a situation and I review it and I do my research and I say, okay, well, this person technically didn't break the law, but clearly what they did was take advantage of someone.
Yeah. We see that a lot, like in long-term care insurance, for instance. You really need to have someone that's going to sit down with you and see if you would be better off going on to long-term care someday for the state, because you don't have enough money to maintain that insurance policy and you're of a low income and it's kind of a waste of money.
Well, it can be. I'm a financial advisor, so I can't make the blanket statement that
No, it isn't
long-term
a
care
blanket, right.
is bad.
It's good for some of us.
Well, long-term care is really expensive if you in fact need it, and it can break a lot of people's bank, and so that's why long-term care exists. Of course, the risk with long-term care insurance is you pay a lot of money and you in fact never need it.
But that's insurance too.
That's
though.
insurance. Yeah, that's all insurance.
That's insurance. I mean, I'd rather pay for it and not need it. But
you did hit upon a point, which is long-term care insurance, annuities, and life insurance in the financial services industry. The majority of the unethical practices and fraud that I see is and I'm not knocking on insurance people, but it's in that life insurance, annuities, and long-term care insurance space. And it's a lot of these free steak dinners where they tell you the sky's going to fall and the world's going to fall apart and the only thing that's going to save you is this thing that I have. and you don't even understand what it is, but you sign up for a meeting, and you go to that meeting, and you receive a really a high-pressure sales pitch, where you end up signing a document, and you have no idea what it is you signed. But you signed a long-term care contract or a life insurance policy or an annuity.
And I guess that would be a red flag, because nobody, one person, no one thing is the answer.
Well, right, and I tell everyone, if you don't understand what it is you're doing, don't do it.
Yeah.
Any ethical person is going to take as much time as needed to answer any questions that you have. And so anyone considering life insurance, long-term care insurance, anything like that, I say take months to ask questions if you need to.
Yeah.
Think about it for a week, come up with a list of questions, call and ask them again. Think about it for another week, come up with some more questions, call and ask them again. Until you get your questions answered and you're 100% confident you know what you're doing, then you can go ahead and move forward.
Then you can go ahead and yeah. So I'm of the age that I get a lot of solicitation in the mail now.
Right.
It's a lot of junk mail, but some of it's very convincing. Some of it even looks like it's coming from a legitimate agency.
Right.
But if you look at it really carefully, there's like one thing off.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Or typically what I see is what's called a teaser rate. For annuities and life insurance, they'll say things like 8% guaranteed. Sometimes they provide the disclosure, oftentimes they don't. But what you'll find, that 8% guaranteed, it'll be guaranteed for the first year, but each year thereafter there's no guarantees. Or it will, they'll get, what they're in fact guaranteeing you is they'll give you your money back at a rate of 8% a year. So it's not interest, it's compounding. They're just saying, you give us $100,000, we'll give you $8,000 back per year. So that's really common, and that's really misleading. But it gets people to show up for the steak dinner. They eat the steak. They feel, because they had the nice free dinner, they heard the presentation that the sky's going to fall. They feel indebted because this particular generation is so nice and so believable.
Nice.
They feel like, well, he bought me a steak dinner and he gave me this wonderful presentation, so at least I owe him a meeting. And then they get into that meeting, and
that's it.
And that's it.
Very high pressure. So real quick, just a few tips to protect ourselves.
Well, first off, again, the way the transaction goes down is the most important thing.
Okay.
Untraceable transactions are your biggest red flag. A sense of urgency is another red flag too. Thirdly, if you're going to work with an individual, go local, get references. Mm-hmm. Ask your friends, ask your family, ask about an organization's reputation, how long they've been around. If an organization, and I'm not plugging my company, but any company for that matter, if they've been in a community and they've been doing business for 40 years or 50 years, obviously they're doing something right.
Stay local, pay attention.
Right.
I really thank you for coming today and talking with me about this. It was really nice to meet you, John, and if you have any questions about today's show, again, call us on the toll-free number, 877-521-3500. This is Senior Moment, Successful Aging. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.